four types of gaming experiences, and then a fifth, a vocabulary to describe what you are after in your hobby. I love the hobby of gaming, and fortunately, it is more popular now than it has ever been in the past. I think that because of this, however, it is a little harder to find people who are after the same sort of gaming experience that I am. For instance, Warhammer 40K, Combat Patrol aside, markets itself as having three distinct ways to play: open, narrative, and match play. Yet despite that, matched play has become the default mode of play for most areas and gaming stores. Yet within that default, there's a spectrum of players who are seeking either competitive or casual experiences, and then there are varying degree of tolerances of like aesthetics of the models, lore correctness, and goofiness within a particular group. Warhammer 40K serves as a convenient example because of its scope and its popularity, but this exists within almost all games. Bolt action and Flame of War players vary dramatically on how much they want to approach the game as a historical game or just another miniatures game. I think this is going to become the next challenge that the gaming community must face. How do we organize ourselves into groups that provide people with different types of experiences that they wish to have? This is important to gaming stores and gaming clubs who are trying to build and cater different communities, or they're trying to brand themselves to set them apart from local competitors. So I propose that the gaming community at large adopts a shared vocabulary that will allow us to define different, equally valid, and not wholly contradictory ways players want to engage with games. That way we can start building better gaming communities and spaces. Undoubtedly, many of you are aware that companies and communities do have their own vocabularies they use to describe gameplay experiences. As I mentioned before, Games Workshop typically organizes their games into three separate experiences: open play, narrative play, and match play. Lots of gaming groups will describe themselves as either competitive or casual. Another giant of the gaming industry, Wizard of the Coast, has their own way to describe different gaming experiences. These are the psychographic profiles, such as Timmy, who likes big exciting things, Johnny, who likes complex and interesting things, and Spike, who likes to win. And then there are many subtypes of these, so it can get much more complex quite quickly. Wizards of the Coast uses these terms to design cards that they can successfully market to these different player types, therefore casting a broader net into the card gaming community. The Games Workshop 3 Ways to Play also directly links different products that they sell to each way to play to facilitate the gaming experience that they are trying to deliver, such as open war cards or crusade books. They are definitions that exist in order to help sell products. Their existence is good for the hobby in that it facilitates the production of goods that you're more likely to want, but it better explains the relationship between you and the company that produces the game and its components, rather than a relationship between you and fellow hobbyists in our own niche community. If the psychographic profiles and Games Workshop's 3 Ways to Play are not the best terms to help describe the type of gaming experiences people are after, what is the way forward? To discover that, I believe we must first consider a quote from the video game designer Sid Meier. Given the opportunity, players will optimize the fun out of a game. Players will use a game as a tool to extract enjoyment, but the fun is subjective. And what someone wants out of a game will be different for different games and different players. Here's a little bit of what I mean by that. Some of my friends in my local gaming group were excited when the game Hamametsu came out, and 4 of us decided to play through the campaign. So we all made our characters, and one of the players, who I've played a lot of games with before and have always enjoyed my gaming experiences with him immensely, played the Ganjin. Now, for those of you who don't know, a major part of the game of Hamametsu is stealth and sneaking around. In fact, one of our players was a ninja, so that part of the game was kind of what their entire character was built around, to be able to experience that. The Ganjin player did not really care for that aspect of the game much at all. So in scenarios, he would charge it immediately, which would sound the alarm and shift the game from the stealth mode to the combat mode. And there would be minimal opportunity to play that stealth half of the game. Additionally, he found a really powerful rules combinations that made him almost invincible. So after he charged in, everyone else kind of just ended up watching him get surrounded by monsters, and he would just wallop his way through them without being in any danger at all. And our character's presence was a little bit superfluous. So yes, we were successful. We completed the scenarios, and you can say we did a good job at them. But the rest of us were not enjoying the gaming experience. The problem is we were optimizing our fun in different ways. Now, this is not tied to any particular game. You can't say that the Ganjin player was playing the game wrong. Or you can't say that we were playing the game right. We were just playing it differently. And almost any game is capable of doing either of these. And I also think it's worth pointing out that this is fluid. You can play the same game and go kind of bias your experience that you want out of it in one way one time you play it, and then a completely different way on another time. And lastly, whenever we think about a game experience, we need to think about it in terms beyond the scope of the gaming table, since oftentimes we don't get to actually play the game as often as we like. The way we engage with a game is generally beyond just the start of a game and its conclusion. The first gaming experience that I'm going to classify and explore is called metagaming. The metagaming experience is all about enjoying the game as a game in its own right. So that's finding pleasure in looking for a way to win and engaging with the meta to find better combinations and do list building. To some degree, this is treating these games the way you might imagine a chess player treats the game of chess. They derive enjoyment from thinking through the games at the game table, trying to solve it like a puzzle. And then between games, they're thinking about how to improve. How can they set conditions to win the next game? What went wrong in the previous one? And that engaging in the game in that way is how they derive enjoyment from it. The game is a puzzle, something to be solved, it's something to be won. Unfortunately, the term metagaming comes with a lot of baggage that is largely due to its origin as a term for a form of cheating in role-playing games. In RPGs, metagaming refers to a player making decisions based on knowledge and objectives that their character would not have, but the player does. It might be described as playing the game instead of playing the character. I think in terms of what most people expect out of a role-playing game, minimizing metagaming is a fair goal for a role-playing session. Yet despite that, I think it's also important to note that there are significant elements of popular role-playing games that seem almost completely dependent on metagaming. Like leveling up is usually only done with a metagaming mindset, and any sort of narrative is applied retroactively. So even when you're role-playing, metagaming can be present and is a valid way to play. So while at the table, the metagaming experience can scratch a certain itch where players mind is engaged, to outwit the opponent. It has the important out-of-game element where you spend time tweaking and building new lists, and you're trying to find different ways to win or to be more effective. So I'm going to contrast metagaming, the experience, with the diegetic gaming experience. You might describe metagaming as making decisions based on a player's personal objectives in the context of the real world. If that's the case, what about when players make decisions with the context of the characters who are engaged in conflict in the imagined world on the table? This is what I call the diegetic gaming experience. It is the one that is most akin to role-playing, but also encompasses a lot of the experiences that historical gamers tend to look for, trying to get into the shoes of the general of the past. That does not mean that a diegetic gamer is not trying to win. It is just that it would be more correct to say that the characters on the tabletop are trying to win. Because of this, a diegetic gamer may make decisions which are suboptimal from the perspective of a metagamer, because they are in pursuit of more fully inhabiting the world and the characters that the game is centered around. What does that mean? Diegetic players will impose their own army building restrictions based on lore or history. They may also make decisions that are in better keeping with the scenario or what the characters on the table know, even though there is what you might say a better option from a tactical perspective. This is also the player who might approach a game and say they won't build an army a certain way because it's not historically accurate. And they would also potentially make the argument that they wouldn't take a tank, which might be the best tank in the game, because it hasn't been in production yet. Even though there's no outright rule saying that they couldn't take it at this time, based on the game. So something I should point out here is there are some game designers, and Glenn Ford from Rule of Carnage is an example, who might call this a false dichotomy. I believe he would argue, not to put words in his mouth, but I believe he would argue that the fact that there's daylight between these two experiences, it is symptomatic of poor game design. And that may be the case, but games themselves don't have to be either cater to metagaming or cater to a narrative diegetic experience. This is about different gameplay experiences that players are looking for. So a well-designed game may allow a metagamer and a diegetic gamer to play a game in perfect harmony, but in either case, both of them are pursuing their own experiences. If you've ever read Clausewitz, he makes a point that there is a philosophical concept of, quote, pure war, which he describes as war for war's sake. He then goes on to assert that this does not exist in reality because war is just a means to an end, a form of armed and violent diplomacy, aggressive negotiations, as a Jedi might call it. Later, John Keegan later expands on the idea to encompass a broader scope that conflict and warfare can also be a form of cultural expression or has social elements to it, and that is key to understanding it. Warfare on the tabletop is no different, but in its own way. Gaming is a means to an end, and for some people that end is social interaction. Games facilitate a shared activity between friends and acquaintances, much the same way that dancing does in something like a social swing dance scene or a Latin dance scene, if you've ever been able to participate in one of those communities. This is a gaming experience that cannot be ignored, and there are lots of games that exemplify this category which fall outside of the tabletop gaming hobby, such as bridge, spades, cornhole, and horseshoes. Party games are a nice example. To people who identify as a gamer, and that is a distinct part of their personal myth and social life, games become a form of personal and social expression, and it is a means for them to connect with other people who share that identity. I think that it's important at this time to bring up a point again that these game experiences are not mutually exclusive. A wargaming league that facilitates social interaction also oftentimes facilitates a competitive metagaming experience. But it's just as possible that someone enjoys a game but does not seek out gaming for social fulfillment through their own participation. So for that reason, I kind of isolate social as its own gaming experience that is often a part of everyone, or at least most people's game that they want to have. So this last category is the most broad and hard to pin down. Whereas metagaming is making decisions to solve the game, and diegetic gaming is making decisions to tell a story and experience the world, then aesthetic gaming is basing decisions towards what is cool or cinematic or funny or exciting or pretty. This has a significant hobby element to it, such as painting your miniatures is a classic example of aesthetic gaming expression and making it all look nice on the tabletop. But it is also about experiencing fun and exciting interactions in the game. So this is a player who might play a spam list or try to take a big model specifically because they want to see what happens and they think it'll look cool. In many ways, the aesthetic gaming experience is the rule of cool, the gaming experience, and also conditioned and qualified with the understanding that what is cool is subjective. Beauty and aesthetics are in the eye of the beholder. So I titled this video 4 gaming experiences and then a fifth. So the 4 gaming experiences I talked about being metagaming, diegetic gaming, social gaming, and aesthetic gaming are the 4 experiences that I primarily consider. However, I think this is a 5th important one, which is its own thing, and it's important and a completely valid way to want to engage with games. And I suppose the fact that wargaming draws its lineage from military training exercises, it should not come as a surprise that an important experience that some people look for in wargaming is to learn something. So that's why we have the educational gaming experience. This is a little bit different from playing a historical game from a diegetic lens, though those experiences are quite compatible. Here are a few examples of what I mean by someone pursuing or creating an educational gaming experience. Some games try to communicate something about an event or an idea by making a game out of it, so it becomes a form of interactive learning. Additionally, there's a type of history called counterfactual history, which is where you play through different what-if scenarios in a disciplined and controlled way to try to discover something about the past and why things happened the way they did. And finally, you can play games to test hypotheses about the future. For example, Rand Corporation, at least I'm sure they've done it more often, but they did a war game to test a new brigade structure for the US Army, and those games helped make an educated decision on whether or not that was a good idea and whether or not those changes should be adopted. So those are different ways you can think about approaching a game for an educational experience. And as also kind of a little side tangent, some game parents who are gamers I have also noticed they like the idea of introducing different games to their kids that involve math as a way of help teaching and reinforcing arithmetic in a fun way. Like if you get your kid to play BattleTech, they will get pretty good at doing basic addition in their head. So I suppose that's another way to look at it. So I think it's important to come back around and consider why this is useful and important to us as a gaming community. Chiefly, I think it's very important that as we develop and grow as a hobby and community and become more mainstream, that we consider what we're getting out of the games, what we want out of it for ourselves, and what type of experiencing we're helping provide for other people. So this can be on a simple one-on-one interaction. If you say on a local gaming Facebook group, hey, I'm looking for a game of Bolt Action, it might be more helpful to say, if you're looking to play a bit more in a metagaming sense, or if you're looking to play in a more historical scenario and something that's a bit more diegetic. Being able to reflect on what you want and communicate that to other players as you find other gamers and make those connections, I think would be incredibly useful. Additionally, if you are attempting to build a community, either as a gaming club or if you're a local gaming store and you're figuring out what you want to cater your space to develop your brand to get gamers in, I think it's worth reflecting on which type of gaming experiences you're biasing and trying to approach and enable. That way, if you want to really be a social space, then, and the social experience is a major part of that, that can go into your idea of like how you structure your evenings or how you set up your play area, which is a little bit different if you want to focus on catering to a metagaming experience to where getting in more players to where they have the proper space to play their game and the terrain is made to be very clear for tournament play, that is going to help cater to that crowd. So I think if you consider these experiences and you make a decision on what you want to provide, that'll help you better shape the community and the customer base that you need. And lastly, if you're making a game or a game product, I think you should also identify how your game enables the different experiences that you're trying to cultivate. And maybe be clear with that for your customers on what your intent is. Though, as I said before, every game can be approached with just about any experience in mind. It depends on the gamer. I think what this would help do is it'll help the customer understand what they're getting out of the product. So that way they approach it with your design philosophy in mind if you are going to bias your design for a particular experience. But on the other side, I think that it is a worthwhile design goal if you try to build a game that can achieve all those gaming experiences in one. So that way, any player who is searching for any of those experiences can exist and enjoy the game without there being a disjointedness because they're trying to optimize the fun out of the game in different directions. So I think that would be a useful thing to reflect on when it comes to designing games. So in summary, we have metagaming, which is approaching the game for the thrill of overcoming its inherent challenges. The game is a skill to be developed, and you are engaging with the meta at large. The diegetic gaming experience which is indulging wholly within the context of the imagined world within the game, and game mechanics merely serve the purpose of facilitating interacting with the game world using its own internal logic. The social experience, which is the game as a means to facilitate connection with other players. The aesthetic experience, where you want to experience or express a particular sensation, though what that means in practice is quite broad and subjective to the player. And then lastly, the educational experience, where games are a pedagogic tool. This can be using a game as a training aid, as a research tool, or to introduce ideas and perspectives. I appreciate you watching this video. I hope that this serves as a conversation starter within the gaming community to help all of us find the gaming experiences we are searching for. If you find any holes in my ideas, please point them out in the comments. I doubt that I stumbled on a definitive answer to my problem with my first attempt, so your feedback on my ideas would be greatly appreciated. Till then, have a nice day.